And welcome to this International Education Partnership CPD video on planning. This is the second of two videos on planning. This one focuses on planning methods. The previous video focused on the stages, the 6 stages of planning. Our aims for this video are further understanding the fundamentals of planning that we started to make steps towards in the first video. Some of you will then use these fundamentals to be able to adapt existing plans and to create new ones. And some people who are at a higher level will then be able to apply the knowledge of the fundamentals during their lessons to identify the activities that must be done and what can be skipped over in a lesson, what's essential and what is non-essential in a lesson. So, some of our main planning methods are starting from scratch, planning with a colleague, reusing plans from last year, using a scheme that we've got in, or downloading planning from the internet. Starting from scratch is probably the least used methods because it's so time consuming. I might start over for one topic in a term, and the majority of my own personal planning would be reusing plans from a previous year or collaborating with a colleague to create new plans. There's also a great deal of planning freely available online, and all of these methods are perfectly valid, providing you address the shortcomings of each different type of plan. So other people's planning, it saves time, is tried and tested, and it's freely available, but it's not adapted to your students. And when I say other people's planning, I mean anything that you are using to teach that you have not specifically planned for this class, this session. So using your plans from last year, that counts as other people's planning because you were someone else back then, young and hopeful when you planned those lessons. So again, as I said, it's perfectly valid to use collaborative plans or plans that you've downloaded from Twinkle or the Cambridge website, or plans that are provided in a scheme that's been bought in by the school, or even the plans that you created last year. I am not suggesting for a moment that every single lesson must be planned from scratch. But regardless of the source of those plans, every lesson must be planned for your students and adapted for your teaching style. As an example, about 3 years ago when I was teaching in Year 2 class, I taught alongside a lovely lady, Mrs. M, who is a very old school teacher. The kids are sitting at their desk quietly, she does the talking, they do the listening, and they get on with their work, and they learn. My classroom, on the other hand, is a slightly different picture. There's kids up, moving around, they're all talking to each other, they're talking to me, it's quite noisy, it can be quite chaotic. Very different styles. When Mrs. M came into my classroom, she always looked slightly horrified at the level of noise and just the general movement of the classroom, but for me it was all purposeful noise. And I was always a bit confused when I went into her classroom and the children were sitting quietly because I felt like they weren't making enough noise to be learning from my style, but from her style, that was fine for her. So some of the lessons that I planned would involve that slightly chaotic, moving around, noisy teaching style. And Mrs. M, she taught the same lessons as me, she followed the same plans, but I would suggest she did it in a more muted manner than I did. And so she was, although she was following my plans, she was adapting those plans to suit her teaching style. So there are some fundamental rules for using other people's planning. And you should go through the same steps when you're using someone else's planning as you do when you're starting from scratch. Obviously the process is going to be quicker because you're adapting what's already there rather than starting over, but it is still essential. So the first step is identifying the learning objective. Is it differentiated? Is it clear? Do you need to reword it? Has it been broken down into success criteria? If so, do these criteria suit your students? Has an assessment method been identified? If it's not explicit what the method that's supposed to be used in the lesson, can you extrapolate from the information you've been given? And does that method suit your students? Have a look at the session outline. Are the tasks suitable? Do they fit your teaching style? Are they way out of your comfort zone? Could your students do them without destroying the classroom? Are they too easy? Are they too hard? which are essential and which can be skipped. So even from here, I had a class, a year 2 class in 1 year, about 5 years ago, who were really, really studious and well behaved. I had the classroom set up with lots of little nooks and crannies and corners for them to go and work in independently, and a lot of the lessons were quite student led, and a lot of my planning from that year allowed for the students to take the lead in the lessons because those students needed that kind of approach. The class I had the following year were totally different, and if I had tried to deliver a lesson in the same way, they would have destroyed the classroom and probably injured one another in the process. So you've got to take into account the kids that you've got in front of you whenever you're adapting planning to suit you. So at this point, it might be useful for you to have a look at some of your own planning. Hopefully you've got some to hand. If not, pause the video and go and grab your planning folder. It would be helpful if this is something you're going to use this term and that you didn't personally plan from scratch, but it doesn't matter. So have a look at the plans and follow these steps and make notes on your planning to adapt the plan to the kids that you have now. Pause the video and spend a bit of time working through these 4 steps. Welcome back. So the final stages of the planning are teaching the lesson and reflecting, and your planning progress continues here where you're annotating, adapting and reflecting and deciding where the next lesson is going. Now you obviously need some students in front of you to be able to do this, so we'll leave this thought process for when you actually deliver the lessons that you've had a look at today. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you found this useful.